Let's open the October 19th meeting of the Topeka City Council's Public Health and Safety Committee. I am Karen Hiller. I'm the chair. Our agenda today is focused on discussion about broadband in Topeka. We will also touch on a couple of items about housing code, property maintenance code changes and enforcement. With that, I'd like to have my colleagues on the committee introduce themselves. Colleague.
Thank you. Neil Dobler, District 7.
Thank you, Neil. And we are expecting Councilwoman Sylvia Ortiz from District 3 any moment. Thank you all. I see an array of folks, some of whom have joined us before for the broadband discussions online and in the room, and also some new faces. Really appreciate stretching from just talking about kids, as important as they are, to adding seniors, kids out of the school environment, and businesses and workforce issues as well. So thank you all for coming. We will get through some introductory business and get right on to the primary subject at hand. Our first action item is to approve the minutes from September 14th, 2020.
Move approval.
Moved. I'll second it. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Minutes are approved. Moving right into our third item, which is internet reliability for Topeka residents. And here's Councilwoman Ortiz. Welcome, welcome. Perfect timing. We have a couple of updates on the schedule, one from Cox, one from 501, USD 501, and one from the city manager. Then I've got we did some consultation with Councilman Dobler and have an idea for some structure that should walk us through discussion on that to see if and when we need to do anything in particular. So are there any reports or updates besides the three that I mentioned, either online or in the room? Okay, well, let's roll. Let's hear from Cox. Megan, and thank you for using the mic. Appreciate it.
Good afternoon. I'm Megan Bottenberg, Manager of Government Affairs for Cox Communications, and thank you again for this opportunity to be here today. We do have some rather big news and updates to share with you all that I think would be appreciative. Over the past few weeks, we've really kind of taken a deep dive. I know you all have been very interested in this. City of Topeka is very well served when it comes to access by both Cox, but also other providers. There are multiple providers here in the city, both for businesses and for residential internet. We know how important that is. But when you look out into the county, that is an area of concern. There are access issues in the county in specific areas, and we know that that's an issue, and we do strive to find solutions and work with officials to find those solutions. We are pleased to announce that since we last met, Cox received a large grant provided by the state through the Spark Grant Task Force, nearly $1.4 million. With that grant dollars, we are going to be serving 550 unserved homes. Now, those dollars are for 5 projects across the state, but 2 are in Shawnee County. And we believe these are our larger projects, 2 of the largest projects, and they really serve both county residents, but most importantly, we know these families live and work here in Topeka. Their students may be attending Seaman School District area schools, but we know their parents probably work in Topeka. They are members of our community, and so we believe this is a great boost and definitely helpful in serving those unserved customers. Just to kind of give you one example, these areas are 300 homes. One is off Schaefer Road up in the Seaman area, and then one is off Nichols Road, both of those subdivisions up there. One resident has been on our list. He had been asking for us to build out to his home for 15 years. Every year for 15 years, we got an email or a phone call from him. He showed us his his speed test of what his current provider provides, and it was 1.3. Just to give you an idea of what that is, 1 megabytes per second download, 3 megabytes per second upload. The FCC has made a minimum of 25.3, so 25 megabits per second download, 3 megabytes per second upload. So obviously these families were in dire need of broadband, high quality broadband services because they just simply could not work and school from home. And he continued to tell us that story, as well as other residents in that area. Like I said, we've been looking at these areas for 15 years. We spent that time over the past 15 years trying to find a way to build out to them. And it would not have been possible without this public-private partnership grant opportunity through the state. We have to have this work completed by end of December, as required by federal rules. But again, we believe this is a huge boost, great news for the community, great news for the county, and a definite example of how private industry can work together in partnership with the county, the city. We appreciate the city manager's support on this project. He was very supportive of it. And again, it goes, and it's a testament to the partnership of working together. We have also, just to give you an idea too, with these grant dollars, other counties have received grants. For instance, one county we're working with, they received Spark grants to serve and provide Connect to Compete internet service. That is our low-cost, low-income internet service to all of their students in that entire county. And so we work directly with the county. It's a similar situation that we have set up through Topeka 501, but with this program, it is set up at the county level rather than at the school district level. But it also, in conversations that I've heard across the city, I wanted to just highlight a couple of lessons learned in the past 4 weeks. One thing I've heard, in conversations about we have problems with broadband here in the city. Sometimes we think we have broadband problems, but what they really are technology problems. Your signal may be really good into your home, but there may be problems within the home that can cause for you to have problems schooling and working from home. So with that, as we like to say, it's technology, not magic. Things can break, and so we want to help. So if anyone, a Cox customer, if you are having internet problems, it may not be because there is a lack of broadband access, but truly a problem that a tech needs to come in and fix. And we want to be available, and so please don't hesitate to call. If you have constituents that have problems, don't hesitate to have them call us directly. We'll have a tech come out and take a look. And while we may be providing great service into your home, there may be other issues that are preventing you as the end user from receiving that great service. It could be a Zoom issue, a utilization issue. It could be needing extenders in your house, like I need extenders in my house. Old technology that you may have that just doesn't work with today's network in your home and router. I've also heard the concern that there are too many people on the network. And therefore my internet service just isn't that great. We check our network every day on a regular basis. And what that phrase is, there's so many people on the network, that means there's congestion, the perception that there is congestion on the network. We check our network several times a day to ensure there is not congestion on the network. And there is actually a wide capacity for more bandwidth and more usage on the network. So that's really not a problem. And so if you are experiencing those problems and think maybe there's too many people on the network, call us. Let us come out, let us take a look, see how things are in your house. We'll make sure your signal is strong in your home, that your network is working inside your home. That's the key part of that. And really, the not having congestion problems, that's a true testament to our investment that we have made in our network and continue to make, because we will continue to make upgrades to our current network. And I know Mr. Gowan and I have spoken earlier today, but I think there has been a little bit miscommunication between families of 501 students and as well as Cox and 501. And we truly, hopefully Mr. Gowan can attest to this as well, we truly are a partnership. And I know he is always working with our team at Cox. I reached out to him today because I knew we had this and really wanted to clear it up, that as families receive information about the Connect to Compete program, instead of working through Cox, we don't want you to go to the Cox store or go to the Cox website, general website. What Mr. Gowan would do, he and his team will send an email to families who are eligible for this program, and he will send an email with the link. Fill out the information on that link. I believe it includes information like identification to ensure that you are eligible or your child's eligible. And then within 4 days of submitting that information, a Cox representative will reach out to you to set up and establish the next steps. So I know there are always things that we're trying to work out and adjust and problems to fix, but I can truly say that we are ready. We stand ready. If you have problems, don't hesitate to call us. But Mr. Gowan's team is truly on it, and just contact him, and he's always a good source of information too. Happy to stand for questions as well.
Thank you. Are there questions? Councilwoman?
Thank you. I think the whole team has met with Megan. I know I have, and I felt really good when I left her on Friday, because we're sifting through all the little, the little quirks that we need to get out. And so I'm confident that these numbers will go up, because I know Megan won't tell you, but I'll tell you. I've been that person that has been told what to do and been led in the wrong position. Now, I know which way to go, but I'm just doing what I'm told. So now what's going to happen is we're going to make it crystal clear, right, Scott? I see you smiling. We're going to make it crystal clear to get this internet connection into that. And when Megan says, we've all heard that. I know I've heard it, dealing with the low to moderate income families and different people. And I know me and Neil have had this discussion. We can only imagine how much the people need and how much that they're not able to get on. So to hear that Cox is measuring that, and she did, now you didn't say this, but she did say we're really low. We're nowhere even close to the top.
Who's
so,
we?
Cox. When they look at how many users, the usage, and so that made me feel really, really good. That made me feel really good that we can add more people on there and more kids on there and get more kids on there. So I felt really confident and really good about that. I think Megan, with all her hard work, and then to see the area, I thought that was awesome too. So as soon as we get it all in black and white, then we can really push it and get the kids on it that really need to be on it. Because there's still a lot of families that are not on it, and they're just bumping into these roadblocks. But it sounds like with the partnership, we're really getting those roadblocks out of the way, and that's great news to me. So Lizone, I'm glad to see you here. You've brought this up for a long time, so I'm glad to see you here, because it's beginning to look crystal clear. So you'll be happy with that. If nobody else, me and you will be happy with that.
Oh, no, he's just looking at you because he's our reality check. So once we get all this talked through, then Lozone will say whether or not he thinks it's all correct, right? Counting on it.
Okay. So I just wanted to say that. I'm pleased with that.
Thank you. Councilman.
Yeah, let me follow that up. I appreciate your time with, I think, all of us. When I kind of started into this, it was, I had the misunderstanding that there were still parts of Topeka that weren't adequately served. And I don't believe that's the case. I mean, you were kind enough to show me the maps and what you can't make public, I understand, but it does look like any house or facility in the city can get high-speed, adequate internet. And so the key is, as Councilwoman Ortiz said, is the ability to get from the street, from the fiber in the street, into the house. And I think one thing that a lot of us overlook who have been around technology for a long time, or in my case, have kids who understand technology really well. There's a lot of folks that don't, and it's daunting. When you think about hooking up a modem, you know, not very many people hardwire their computers anymore, so you're talking wireless. You know, it's a modem, it's a wireless router. I woke up this morning and our internet was out, and you know, I was able to troubleshoot a little bit, and then actually got on the app and had somebody chatting with me, and the modem was dead, so I had to go buy a new modem. Didn't take long, but just some of those things that we take for granted, not everybody can do. So I think where we're going to find ourselves soon here is trying to answer the question of how do we help people overcome that next leap, that next technology leap to get to where they need to be. So again, appreciate it very much. Yes.
And Neil, you know, she helped me with that because that's what was my question. Do we need a modem? Do we need a router? What do we need? And that's when she's saying, let Cox do their job. We just need you to call us. We just need you to apply, and it's free. And some of the problems that people are having that they think are issues are really not issues. I mean, she talked about how she had to go closer to her router, right?
My daughter was having Zoom problems
Right.
for school. And one would look at it, if you aren't aware, one would look at it and go, well, it's the internet. And I'm even texting my guys saying, do we have an outage in my neighborhood? Come to find out, it's Zoom is having problems every once in a while, but also we have so many walls that the signal has to go through. We need extenders in our house. I'm too lazy to go buy them yet. And so bringing my daughter to her computer closer to the router really helped. And to your point, Councilwoman, I think there are a lot of those that we just don't know until we start reaching out, maybe to Cox, to the chat, you know, just calling and going, okay, I've got this problem. Can you double check, make sure my network's okay? Is it okay in my home? Please call. One example, 3 executives down in Wichita, they were like, well, we have broadband problems in our house. We went, it was a technical problem on our network issue that we had to address. And so again, we wouldn't have known that if they didn't call. We are happy to take any calls and make any troubleshooting visits. Happy to do that.
And a lot of the low to moderate income people, they think that they have to pay for that router or they have to rent it. Again, they can't afford it. So to hear, no, it's free. We're going to have somebody come out, install it. We're going to take care of it. We're going to take care of you. That's a breath of fresh air for them.
Let's clarify that, though.
And that is for the Connect to Compete program, yes.
For Connect to Compete, but not everybody.
Not everybody. There may be a small charge, but we can get you that information too. But usually installation is provided as well.
Well, and again, I think all of us deserve some sort of a prize for being the test rats for this conversation because each of us had different issues, but it sounds to me like, and we're still just talking about school-age kids, and the issues are bigger than that. But staying with that for the moment, I like the fact that you used your example of the Cox executives, because when you and I talked, you know, from my background in doing tenant landlord and money management counseling for a career and working in community as well, what I see as the barrier for many people to access services that they need, all the way up to corporate execs, is they don't want to look stupid. And so the issue of asking an embarrassing question that we should have known about or getting ourselves hooked into spending money that we don't have or weren't prepared to spend at the moment, and not knowing, I mean, we all get telephone solicitations and this and that, not knowing what the drill is so you know how to head off something that shouldn't happen and only get yourself to something that should. Even with what Scott's still just nodding, he'll get his turn in a minute, but if people are supposed to call 501 to then get access to Cox, are 501's people prepared enough to explain all of that so that the families have confidence that they're not getting themselves into something they don't want to be in yet? You can just nod yes or no. Plug in.
I will say close to that, yes.
Okay. I mean, those are it. We talked was it at this meeting, the example of just when automobiles came in or various mechanical kinds of things that people were unfamiliar with, there's a burn-in time to kind of get comfortable. So I'm seeing lots of issues come up, and one of the things we were hoping to do through this conversation, even today, is to kind of pinpoint, what we thought the issues were and what they maybe really are. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just want to say one more thing. As we get into more of this conversation, this is an issue that can grow very rapidly, and I think hopefully Michelle will be able to visit in a little bit. I think the task force that originated several years ago looked at a community-wide solution that rapidly got large, so large that it was almost unable to sustain itself. What we're talking about here is taking small steps. So I think our discussion from day one has been, how can we serve kids that need to do homeschooling? That's what we're talking about here, the partnership. It's the parts of Topeka that need that service. And so I think as we go forward and talk about solutions, if we can keep focused on the city of Topeka and the school and 501, that partnership, what we can do there, and then we can start expanding out very quickly. Geographically, we can talk about the county. It is a community, I understand that, and at some point we need to talk about what we can do to extend this beyond the city limits. And then I think demographically, we're going to talk about, whether it's adults that need to apply for jobs or older folks that need access. All those things can come up, but I think right now if we stay focused on the kids, that's where we need to go, because we don't want it to get so big so rapidly that we can't deal with it. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you. I hear you on that. I feel a little bit differently because I think the seniors are isolated right now, and the issue of being able to get exercise. Deborah Dawkins did such a good job at talking about that at our social services thing. I mean, they can't come to the community center and they can't go anywhere else because people are either not going to their homes or they're not getting out. And both the socialization as well as the physical exercise, making sure that people eating and so on. And I'm not sure that as I'm listening to this discussion so far, that the issues are any different, except that there's not a conduit for paying for the service, but that the issues of, I don't know anything about a modem, I don't know anything about, I think we should keep those other populations at least in mind, in that if one of our solutions is a community-wide education campaign to understand how things work with broadband and internet providers and inside your home and what you have to pay for and what you don't, for instance, unless there's going to be a difference between different classes of customers, that's generic information that then when we would target a campaign could just as easily be community-wide than limited to just going to kids through 501. So, if there's, I appreciate the idea of targeting, but I'm really sensitive about, at the same time, about somebody that can't get a job because they don't realize they should just go sit with their cell phone at the other end of the house so they can pick up the signal or something like that. And we did invite the workforce folks to join, just to, and we can still focus, but for them to listen in and key in and be thinking about the populations that they're serving as well. Any other questions of Megan?
And to your point, real quick, Chairwoman, I will just say, Cox, we stand ready and available to help find solutions. We know that there are other populations that need assistance. Right now, we're focused on kids because with the pandemic and everything we've been through since March, we know that's a priority to be available to school from home. I heard of another community just today that they've moved all their kids online. And so thanks to Mr. Gowan's partnership with us, we're able to take the lessons learned from 501 and we're now applying it to this other school district in the state. So, but we also know there are other demographics and other groups of population that need this assistance as well. And we would stand ready and available as, to help you find solutions and creative and innovative solutions that can work best for everybody.
I'm going to ask a question that's going to sound a little funny that I'm just asking you, but you're the only provider that's here, and you are the big dog in Topeka anyway. Well, I'm thinking of the kinds of comments that we hear on the street, which is, boy, if we just had more providers, if they would open up the market, we'd have some more of these alternate providers, there'd be better competition and things would be better. But as I watch what's happening, you guys are of a size where you've got the ability, you've had the ability so far to do some pretty amazing things. Can you address for a moment, obviously from your point of view, what advantage or disadvantage there might be to having just for the record, the city's open and anybody can get a franchise, so I'm not trying to make a policy decision, but can you talk to us about whether there's, what happens in other communities, advantage or disadvantage of additional providers?
Sure. I can say, obviously we appreciate competition. We're a business. We are driven on competition. We want to go and compete with other businesses. We believe we have a quality product. In my opinion, we have the best product, but I work for Cox too. But truly, with any business, there is a cost to it. And some of our costs are, set at levels that are above my pay grade. So we take into account a lot of different aspects to it. When it comes to cable, there's a lot that goes into the price. It's the contracts or the retransmission costs, the costs for programming. That goes into your cable cost when we talk about that. When you talk about internet, there are costs that go into it for upgrades, investment upgrades. When we say, okay, we need to make sure the network's not congested, there are upgrades that we have to make to ensure that the network maintains its quality, and we're able to prepare for the future. So there is a lot more for us that goes into the cost than just saying, well, what's this competitor offering? Well, we can lower it. There's a lot more to it. And so we truly believe that, you get a quality product from our cost and our price. But like I said, we thrive on competition. That's why we're a business and we welcome competition.
Okay. And those that may have come up a little more based on some of the conversations we started with, which is people thinking that we needed physical service to places that didn't have it. I'm not sure. I just wanted to bring that out. Okay, any others? We may come back to you, but let's let you have a seat and we'll get Scott Gowan on.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me. Want to touch base on a few items first. Since we last spoke, we have had a chance to measure our response from the initial group of people who were invited to participate in our Cox Partnership program. And I'm happy to report that 64% of our families were able to connect and were able to use the new partnership program, and we've begun paying for them. And so I'm excited about that. While I'm excited about the 64%, that leaves about 36% of that original group that either didn't get the message or didn't respond to the message right away or had some complications along the way. So in addition to continuing to communicate out with that group, we're also going to include some of our new enrollees who have applied for free and reduced lunch benefits since that time. And so you can expect that communication will be going out this afternoon because I've already begun working on it. And just want to make sure that we can follow up with those families who may have had a difficulty with it or who may not have gotten the original communications that went out. So I was excited to see that number were able to connect. Essentially, they were able to do the process from the link entirely. We did have interactions with a number of families, but it was nowhere near that high. And so I did not know what that end connection volume was going to look like. So we were excited to see that. So most of our families were able to connect without interaction with us, but we did encourage them if they were having difficulty to first reach out to us so that way, and when I say us, I mean the IT department at Topeka Public Schools. That way, if there was an issue with their address, we can address it on our end before involving Cox in that. Just to make sure that we were trying to connect the right locations. So we did experience a number of challenges. We had some families who had since moved, and so we had to have a new address approved for those families in order to get them connected, since the address that we had sought out to provide the services was not the address that they were currently living at. We also had some families who had some outstanding bills that needed to be worked through. We worked through a couple of community groups to kind of help with that, in order to make sure that that was an option available for them to continue with. Then one problem that we did not anticipate, which was actually really a beneficial problem to have, is we had families that were, we didn't anticipate. Families would have bundled services and could actually wind up paying more for their bundled services as a result of the option that the district was willing to pay for. So in collaboration with Cox, we're modifying our memorandum of understanding, and the district is offering two ways of paying for this service for our families. In addition to paying for the Connect to Compete level of service, we are also willing to pay a comparable credit for those families that wish to stay bundled. And so that might explain some of that 36% that wasn't able to go with the first group. And we hope to be able to go back around with the ones that didn't connect and basically say, look, there's another option available for you, just in case you're considering it. And then the other thing that we did run into is that there is still some miscommunication out there. We've been working with the Cox Connect to Compete program for several years, and I don't want to quite say a decade, but for several years we've been working with them on that, where we have had a document that families needed to get from our food service program, and then they reach out to Cox to connect directly. And that's been the procedure for several years. With this new partnership, though, it works a little differently. They got to basically work through the food services program in order to become eligible, but then we kind of take it from there until we get back out to them with the email address. And so we've had some families who had previously participated in the Cox Connect to Compete program. We've had some staff members who have given out, staff members that aren't related to IT, who gave out the same information they're used to giving out year after year. And so we have had some families that were misdirected when they should have been directed to the IT department so we could take care of them. You had asked the question earlier, is our IT staff ready and willing to be able to address some of the questions that might come up that we've already talked about so far? And the answer is yes, for the most part. However, we don't normally get those questions. They've been going to our central office, and so sometimes they go to other offices besides IT, and they're not necessarily getting the answer. They're getting an old answer. They're not necessarily getting today's answer. And so we're going to work hard to try to close that communication gap. The other thing I want to say is we've taken it a step further. We recognize that there is a time difference sometimes in some of our families connecting. And so we've also sought out some short-term solutions for our families. I know T-Mobile has agreed to us on an additional partnership where we can provide short-term limited hotspots for those families that are still waiting to get connected. It's my preference, just because the data quality between the two, it's my preference to get them connected on Cox, simply because they'll have better quality service within their home. But we do also have the option of using hotspots where it's appropriate to do so for the time that it takes them to get connected. We have actually about 1,000 of them on the way. They're going to be limited over the course of the year, but it'll certainly be helpful to get some of our families connected. So, and I'll be glad to take any questions.
If you could clarify, you talked at the very beginning about the cohort, if you will, the first group of whom 64% are connected. How big was that group, and what portion of your students?
So it was huge. The proportion that got connected was about 2,700 families, and the original cohort was about 4,000-ish. I don't have the number directly in front of me here. 4,324. There we go. I did. All right. So that was that first cohort group that, if you will, the pilot group. And I will say that our office took about somewhere in the range of 100 to 150 phone calls. So the majority of people
not
completed
bad.
that process. Isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
The majority of people completed that process straight from the link, straight from the email, without additional support. And that to me speaks volumes to the degree to which we were able to kind of put together a program that can get that many people, that not just us, but working with Cox, they automated as much of that process as they could. And so I think that speaks volumes to the efforts that they put forth.
Well, as long as the kids were educated, they say if you're having tech problems, ask somebody under the age of about 24, right? So maybe
Yeah,
the kids
that
did
does
that.
tend to help. and again, we did provide as much information as we could in the email. But again, it is not lost on me that families that are having difficulty connecting, if our message is coming out to them via email so that they can go to a link to connect, sometimes the families don't have that initial connection to be able to navigate that process. And so that fact is not lost on me, but that doesn't mean we won't circle back around and try to find solutions for them as well.
Wow, that's a great report. Questions?
I just have one
Yes,
comment.
go ahead.
Scott, thanks for everything that you're doing. I just want to make sure that you talked about going in to make sure that all the employees know the process now as opposed to the old process, so that they will not be giving out that misinformation. So you're going to start from the bottom to the top and make sure that they got that right.
Yes, we did actually put it in our staff newsletters and stuff like that. So we kind of thought the word was out there, but we are still hearing of people who went directly to food services and then got sent in a different direction. And so we're going to make sure people know that the only way to do the Cox Partnership is through the IT office. The Cox Connect to Compete is always available, but those are two different programs, and we want to make sure people are taking advantage of the one that is being grant funded for free. And
Okay.
so that's the goal. So I definitely will be following up with that.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you.
That's not a problem.
You know, I've been looking at the council, and I hopefully haven't failed to see anybody. Anybody in our audience have a question for Scott, or even prior to Megan? And there'll be an opportunity later. I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss important questions. All right, well, let's put you on hold for a moment. Bring the city manager up here to give us a report from the city. And that has to do with the original question, apparently right-of-way and utility lines.
Right. And
Or something cooler than that.
it's kind of interesting. You know, one of the things that I haven't commented on is that back when the original JADO task force went through the process of analyzing things, one of the tasks the city had after that was to look at our rules and procedures and as they relate to the access that individuals needed to have in order to be able to put fiber into the ground in our community. And through that discussion, staff went through the process, and what we found is that most of our policies were up to date and were where they needed to be in order to support individuals that would want to do so. And then ironically, shortly after that, another third-party provider of internet service became interested in Topeka based off of that analysis and came to town. I met with them, and part of that discussion that I had with them was, have you looked at the possibility of coming to our community, and would you say we're going to be easy to do business with? And he felt that we were in the right spot related to the fact if he wanted to put fiber into the ground in our community and begin to provide that service, that we were in a good spot with our policies. So I feel pretty comfortable with where we're at in that regard. I also recently asked staff about the possibility going back to looking at the concept that was presented by Councilman Dobler related to placing conduit in our intersections and so forth in order to gain access, because that's actually one of the most costly features that we have is anyone that wants to put that into the ground. Digging up our intersections, putting the fiber in through those conduits, putting the conduits there is a major component of the expense they have in order to be able to consider. Interestingly enough, we have not a consistent policy, but we have been doing that. We have a couple of intersections that work has been done where we actually did put a fiber conduit in there to avoid the need of tearing up the intersection again. There's cost related to that, and so we haven't done it with every intersection, but it is something that as we go forward, depending on where we're at, it may be something that we make as a standard if we want to pursue this going forward of having that. There are some benefits for us that if in the future there's a provider that wanted to come in, the fibers, that conduit is already there, it will avoid having to tear up our street after, especially if it's been recently redone. And so there may be some, even though it may never get used, that's the possibility, is that that conduit would never get used. Having it available at an inexpensive cost, doing it when we're initially doing that work could be beneficial to us. And so I think that's something we need to continue to evaluate. Not a guarantee that we need to do it, but I think it's definitely got merit. And so it's something that we can look at. So that's kind of what I found from our research on where we're at. And we know that there are, you talked about competitors, and I talked to Megan about this. There are different people in town that provide service of different kind than what they provide for individuals in our community. So there are a number of other possibilities. And from time to time, they have a desire to expand. They may not be in a certain neighborhood now, but they get a customer in a neighborhood and they want to expand. Then that's where it comes back into the fact that, do we have a conduit there that makes it inexpensive for them to be able to provide that?
So we have service everywhere.
Right.
But we have had some interest, at least from time to time. Why would, and just help me with this, and Megan can chime in, if Cox has what they need and people are served, why would we, that question I asked earlier, invest or not, but encourage additional providers to come in, especially if we're going to put some money into it?
Well, and I don't know that it's something that we would encourage other providers to come in, but it is a free marketplace, and there are
Right.
other providers. And interestingly enough, some of them actually use Cox's system as their basis for then providing it.
Well, that's
So
what I remember
they're
learning
kind
about
of
all
as
this.
a reseller of a product that already exists, but they provide then additional services. A lot of times it's to business and industry, an additional service to business and industry that Cox doesn't provide. So they buy that service connection to the internet from Cox and then provide additional services to them along the way. And it's just like our access for internet comes from Cox. And so we get that access. We buy it in a different way. We market it. It's out for bid. And we get that service. And it's much greater than your average type of service with all of our users that we have at the city. We need a different kind of service than you get from the average person. And I've asked Megan about, are there other areas of the city that maybe the business service that might be needed for business and industry isn't provided? Because she provides the service throughout everywhere, but is it available at the level that's needed for business and industry? Because what I found in the past in Mason City was there was a service that was needed in our downtown in Mason City that wasn't provided by the cable provider that provided internet. And there was another company that came into town and provided the higher end level of service. And so that's why they came to town. But in order to do that, they had to have a certain level of customer commitment before they would ever come to town. And so that's something that we might experience at some point.
Okay. Questions?
Thanks.
Questions?
All right. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Well, with that feedback, again, and with the consultation from Councilman Dobler, who got this started, it would seem that we need to first loop around this learning that we've done and input and say, what's the problem? Is there a problem? And if so, what's the problem? I'll lead to Councilman Dobler to help us with that.
Well, I think it might be good to hear, maybe Lazone would like to discuss a little bit. I know Michelle and I had a conversation a week or so ago about, where the Greater Topeka Partnership is going. And again, I think if we keep it focused on the city, for instance, at this point, what are the issues that we're facing? How can we help? So I think we've already established that the problem is there's still folks that may or may not ever call Cox for whatever reason. How do we identify those folks, and how do we help them overcome the technology gap? Does that take money? Does that take manpower of some sort that we can provide, or Topeka can provide, or somebody can provide? I think that's probably the easier way to start. Just identifying those gaps that we know we have right now. I mean, we just heard from Scott that there's potentially 36% of the families that aren't able to take advantage of the basically free internet. So I guess maybe we
Okay.
could ask some others to.
With your clarification, though, and I think of where we started, which was even if we wanted to be focused on the city, we didn't know if there was service even everywhere in the city. We knew there were unserved people, but we didn't know if there was service. And so we've made a gigantic leap since we started in terms of being able, unless there's some question about it, to say, well, there is service. So that's not our problem. Our problem, we still have the problem that a variety of people are not connected, but we do have service. And so, yes, and if we want to limit our conversation to the city only, and we could talk about expansion, then that really helps us frame moving forward. Councilwoman.
I agree. I see that we've already knocked off that we do have service. What I see, Neil, is there's some miscommunication out there, and I think Scott is working on that. And I think once that miscommunication gets clear, I think then people will know which way to go and how to get there. I talked about those roadblocks, and I see, and he has assured me he's going to move those roadblocks out because there's just been some miscommunication that's very detrimental that you can't get there. So people are doing things. So I think once that's done, I would like to see us maybe at the next meeting, see if our numbers come up once we clarify that and give that to those families, you know, and then see what this grant covers, you know, because there's clearly a lot more that they can give out. And but until we make it clear on how to get to A to Z, they're not going to be able to do that. And so I'm very, very confident with that.
So here's a suggested course of action. If we kind of take this in steps, we've kind of eliminated or we've taken care of the discussion, I guess, about infrastructure inside the city of Topeka. We've apparently taken a giant leap on the question of whether kids who need access, primarily in 501, I suppose we could expand that out a little bit if we needed to. Like you say, we can keep tabs on that, make sure that those numbers are continuing to go up. If there's anything that we need to do, we can. Maybe the next step is, again, staying within the city limits for right now, starting to look at the other demographics, older folk, anybody, I guess, that needs access that doesn't have it because of financial hardship. Once we get through that, we could talk about expanding to the community as a whole outside of the city of Topeka. And obviously that becomes a bigger conversation with Shawnee County, with Go Topeka, whoever.
And I want to back you up, though, because I think we have a couple more problem areas that we've uncovered in this conversation. So,
And I think that's when Megan says with this new grant, the county is going to be finally covered after 15 years of asking.
No, just
right?
some.
Small
Yeah, that's
portion.
right.
Two
Just
little,
small.
two little
Right.
sectors.
So even if we went out of, you're right, that small group, I'm thinking on the top and then the side. I know they're probably like, what is she thinking about? Anyway, but even
300 families.
yeah, but even with that, Neil, well, I lost my train of thought. I think 501 is the only school district in there, maybe a little bit of Seaman and Shawnee Heights, right?
And rural
And rural.
in Topeka. And plus, we've got some private schools and districts as
that's
well.
True. That's true.
The whole Mater Dei district and so on.
So that's what I see the problem as we got to make it crystal clear on how to get there. And then if they don't reach out and take it, that's on them. But right now, if we don't make it clear, it's a frustrating process. Trust me, I know it's a frustrating process.
So I think if we can identify all the problems that we've heard regarding the students, then when we start to ratchet into other groups and so on, we will we'll see whether those problems exist as well, whether the solution's the same or different. Two others that I heard were old equipment. That was part of the problem when she sent Cox out to my house, because my laptop is old. And so it's not as powerful.
She was talking about herself.
Stop it. Anyway, but the whole tech thing, which Scott mentioned, just to get it off me.
Yeah.
But if the technology inside the house, understanding what a modem is, what a router is, understanding and having older equipment and not feeling like you are in a position to replace that with something newer for whatever reason. So understanding that older tech and then just tech overall, what are the pieces and how do they work together? And then understanding also how the actual broadband moves. So for instance, understanding what Megan described as her problem, but placement in your house, how most people can kind of figure it out when you talk about walls and invisible wavelengths needing to get through a wall to get to you. Nonetheless, if that is something that people aren't familiar with, so they've tried it in their house and it didn't work, so they figure that connectivity isn't good, it's not, then there's an education thing so that people can figure out how to grab that invisible broadband in their home or wherever they are and make it work. So that each of those, is kind of bundled maybe into 501's process, but those separate pieces are part of the problem. I'm trying to think if we've raised any other issues. Well, and similar to the way broadband travels is an understanding of what the capacity is of a certain level of service. Whether your problem is because there's 4 kids with tablets and mom's trying to be online with grandma, and so thinking that maybe having 5 devices working in one house is the problem versus whatever it is. So the let's see, travel, I don't know what the word is but also volume.
If I
Go ahead.
could, just going back to the original discussion of 501 and students having access, this question I guess for Scott, how do you determine that the issue's been solved? How do you know when you're down to just a handful of families that don't have good access?
So in my conversations with families, there were families that did not want to change from what they were currently using. So I can fully anticipate that we will never get to 100% of our eligible families working on our partnership with our, even with the upgrade that allows us, the upgrade to the memorandum of understanding, which allows us to pay for services that are bundled, that pay the same amount toward the services that are bundled. We probably will not get to the 100%. But I still feel like we can get a lot closer than we are right now by circling back and letting them know that that is an option. Because for so many of them in that first group that I talked to, so many of them did not want to change from their bundled service that they already had with Cox. And so they're not participating. They're not in our participation numbers simply because they're already a Cox customer. They already had a pretty good bundled deal. And they realized that if they took away that bundled deal, it was going to cost them more than just paying for the Cox just paying for the Cox as it was. And so embedded in those percentages is that issue. So while we won't ever get to 100%, I'm certain we can get a lot closer. And I did run some quick numbers while you guys were speaking. There's about 2,700 families that I still want to hit. And so if you look at, and that's new families that have since qualified, and that's families that may not have heard the communication the first time it went out. But that's the number, that's the new number we're shooting towards. And so of that 2,700, there may be a portion of them that are just going to choose not to do it. But I think we can definitely get a good chunk of them on active and using it.
Got a question for you. It's come to all of our attention in different ways. A lot of kids aren't at home before and after school, and a lot of this, even the off-site learning, is happening because daycare providers are becoming kind of mini school hosts, and some kids, because of their arrangements with parents working and so on, are going to grandparents' houses or somebody else's house instead of going home after school. And so just hooking up their house isn't solving the connectivity for them at the time that they need it. And then we also, and I actually learned this from the senior centers talking, but if you, and Dawn McWilliams was on, but if all of a sudden you're at the Boys and Girls Club and you've got 40 kids that all need to be on at the same time after school because they're in their mentoring program, and they never anticipated that much, the need for that much bandwidth at an after school program of whatever level. How are you dealing with those, whatever you want to call them? There's a place that the kids are really doing their homework that's not at home. How are we accommodating that in this program?
Well, this program actually only applies to the household residents of the student. And there's another group that, that is kind of left out there. There's that group of families where they have joint custody.
Right.
And 50-50 joint custody, not even 60-40, where you have the 50-50 joint custody. And what we've encouraged families when they've called us is let's look at the one that needs it the most. Let's look at the household that the student is in more, or the household that the student is in after school, and let's try to target that one and at least solve that part of the problem. I'll be honest with you, what you raised right there is exactly why, and again, I think I told you guys at the last meeting, I've done this in lots of communities. That's exactly why we have to have a community broadband situation, because it shouldn't matter where a student goes. They should be able to connect to something somewhere within our footprint and get the kind of service that they need. But I will say, for those extenuating circumstances, even for temporary situations, where for the next 2 weeks, John's going to go to grandma's house and instead of going to his own house after school. That's why we are putting some hot spots available in our school libraries, where when those situations come up, the school has a resource available that they can tap into. And again, it's not unlimited, but it is a limited resource that can help in that kind of a situation.
Well, so
until we get community broadband.
So the question back to where we are in our proceedings would be, is that a problem right now or not?
I think it is a problem.
Okay.
Yeah, like I said, 501 and the grants that we've the grants that we received, and the working with Cox, we've been able to solve part of it, but I think that remains to be a problem. We still have places within our footprint that may not be a child's household residence, but that may be where a child is, and that may be where a child needs to connect. And so we still have gaps in what we are able to do, and we try to find ways to accommodate that, but it is still a problem.
Well, and for just to make sure we have it clear then, and if you want to defer to Lizone, that's okay. But so when you say that's why we need community broadband, what are you saying?
I'm saying that that's why we need, within the city of Topeka, we need to have a wireless-based broadband service that has nodes that covers the community. And that ultimately is a footprint that ultimately was the recommendation of the committee that we were working on with Dr. Millsap, was that we needed to have some sort of service that provided that base level of connection for everyone in the community.
I'm gonna play dumb because if we already have Cox service in the whole community and there's Wi-Fi here and there that people can either access because there's a sign or something, or because they picked it up on their phone, or they just sat next to the wall of a building, explain maybe how it would work, but what the difference is between having full coverage in our community and having community broadband, if you would.
So having full coverage in a community means that you can step away from a building. So for example, all of our schools, we have some bleed out from our internal wireless systems. We have some parking lots that have better coverage than others, but as students could conceivably participate in school from the parking lot. And most of our area businesses can connect outside the building to their inside network. This would be for all those places in between from a broad tower wireless footprint. So again, where I've worked on it in other communities, we've had situations where you might have a large concentration of wireless access points around area businesses, but then you cross the street and there's a large open area that does have traffic going through it, but it doesn't have the buildings that would have the wireless access points to be able to connect to. Does that make sense?
So sort of, but how does that work in terms of, I've heard some discussion about creating a city utility, for instance, and I don't know exactly what that means, but I mean, how would it, if we had community broadband, is that instead of what we have right now and we all pay in, or is that something that's an overlay and people still buy theirs? How does that work?
More often than not, it is like a base level of service that some people partake in and others choose to still use private enterprises.
So how many people would no longer need, with what typically people use, how many people would be able to just quit paying for service because it was all they needed, and how many would continue being customers of providers directly?
I guess that depends on the quality of service, whatever the minimal service is. In most places that I've seen something like this implemented, it serves about 20 to 25% of the customer base. And that's mostly the customer base that wasn't connected in the first place.
Repeat that.
It's about 20, I would say 20% would be what you would see ordinarily on a community broadband versus being on a private broadband. You do get better service on a private, like if I contract with Cox, for example, and I am directly connected to them, I'm going to get a better quality of connection than if I'm using a tower that several of my neighbors are also using. Does that make sense?
So how does a community do that?
Well, I think the first step is what we did with the broadband initiative, and again, Dr. Millsap could speak to that more specifically because I joined late in the game. The first step is analyzing what it is that the community needs and what it is that the community wants to fulfill, and then from there you seek out vendors that want to be part of that process. Either they want to be the connection or they want to manage the towers that connect to, like a Cox connection for service.
And are you saying that study that was done before already did all that?
I don't think so. I think that was just the first step of identifying that there was demand out there for it, and I think the next step was determining what to do with that demand. I know that they did work with the engineering firm to show that we had a ring, for example, available where we could do some connections. I think there were some designs, and again, Dr. Millsap could better speak to that than I could. I think there were some designs in what I saw as far as where they could place a tower and get the kind of connectivity that they needed, or place a node in order to get distributive connectivity.
Sounds like you're doing all right. Lazone's kind of nodding back here with smiling eyes. So if we were just, because we're talking about what's the problem and solutions, if we were to do that, we would need then to take that next level and get someone to either Cox, because they really wanted our business, or some professional to do a study and tell us what equipment we would need and what it would cost to do that.
That's pretty much the next step.
Oh, you said yes and Lazone said no, so you're finally...
So we have disagreement. No, the next step, I'm going to defer to her because she's the expert on that process. But the next step would be to have some sort of companies do that level of analysis for us, unless it was already done. And again, I wasn't part of that process.
So we could even just simply ask the providers, the internet providers, to make proposals?
Well, if they're an internet provider, they may not have the other side of it, which is the broadcasting towers. So.
Okay. Lazone, you want to help us out with any of this, or just going to let it, you got to come up to the mic if you are.
Thank you. And I'm not going to delve too far into that discussion because I know that there was a lot of monies from the state, and who knows, there may be something that some company has provided that may have been awarded. I really don't know. But this line of sight, you know, type of scenario that he is mentioning, that's, you know, something that is doable.
I'm not sure I followed you. Maybe everybody else did. So the state may have done some analysis along these lines already on our behalf?
Well, I don't know from the 54, 50, $60 million or 49 that they had spent. Maybe there's a provider that is proposing this. I really don't know. For this particular area. That's the type of project that they probably should have funded. It may not have been with such a short window of
well, when
opportunity.
you say they, could
the
you
state who issued the spark monies for broadband infrastructure type of process, but not knowing what someone might have presented, maybe they did. Megan has her hand up. But that would have been a bigger picture under knowing some of these answers, probably should have came under that $250,000 study. And then we would have had some of the answers to these. And that's what I would have expected, so that you could have had, okay, we have $50 million, what do? We already have the plans, things, and everything set up. Now we're at the point to where we still need to gather that information and see what needs to be done. There are tall places from the old Bank of America building to whatever, when you're doing site to site, point of
line of sight.
Yes.
What in effect
All
would
right.
be towers?
Yes. There are things that can be done.
Question
Please.
or comment, I guess. Seems like we're heading down a road that maybe we're not quite ready for. I think the issue now is we've got infrastructure in place. Forget who owns it right now. We've got people that need access now or as quickly as possible. Can we work on that now and then go to the community-wide? I mean, somebody's got to pay for that ultimately. And that may be a great way to go down the road. But right now we're talking about, we just help people get access to what's already available.
If I may, I'm going to ask Megan to come up, because the issue is, on the other hand, we've got COVID money coming down, and we sure don't want to miss an opportunity to snag it for some of those bigger things, because all we're looking at, and Megan, you were kind of making motions as if you might have something to share. I just want to make sure we know what we need long-term, even if we haven't dwelt on it, and that we don't miss an opportunity.
I was just, thank you. I was just going to say that the CARES Act dollars from the feds and from the state, 60 million, as Lizone mentioned, 60 million was designated for connectivity. 50 million of that was for infrastructure, broadband infrastructure expansion for the entire, throughout the state. 10 million was for adoption. And I think adoption is the key issue that we are talking about here in the city. Cox had some proposals for adoption and it just didn't work out. And that would have been, directly into several units, housing units throughout the city. But I was just going to say, unfortunately, I believe that money is spent by the state. I don't think that is available at this point, but of course that would be up to the Department of Commerce and determining where they're at. But I know the 50 million of infrastructure expansion that is spent, that was already designated and announced last week or the week before. And the 10 million, I believe, is spent as well, but I have not received a huge update on that yet. And I know of the expansion, I don't believe any of those projects would have been community broadband for Topeka. I believe the only ones in Topeka area was Cox's proposal to serve those 300 homes up north.
I just want to make sure that if I think you mentioned to me that something further, that we just needed to keep our eyes open for something further to develop. And along those lines, if we've got an idea of what it might take to do it and what we've already got in place, and we just have city manager or whoever put a word in with the governor's office or whatever, that we're hoping that they don't continue to limit the Sparks program just to rural, but instead that we want to suggest that they are looking at other I don't want to miss that chance.
Absolutely. So I think, and that kind of gets us to another point too. The infrastructure investment or the infrastructure grants through the state under the CARES Act were for unserved areas that did not have 25.3 speed, the 25 megabytes per second download, 3 upload. And we had to prove as an applicant that that area was unserved. In my humble opinion, it would be difficult to prove that community broadband here in Topeka would be providing that to unserved areas because most of Topeka is served.
Right. You
would go through that adoption, potentially. Now, and of course, those are CARES Act dollars, and we don't know what's going to happen in the next, if there's another federal relief program. The state also, earlier this year, the state legislature provided in the transportation, the new 10-year transportation plan, $5 million annually for broadband expansion. Now, that we believed was designed for unserved areas as well, and with a focus and a priority on unserved areas of Kansas. $5 million does not go a long way. However, on an annual basis and over time, maybe we'll get all of Kansas connected. But again, the priority was based for unserved. Now, again, if we look to adoption and opportunities to solve the adoption problem, maybe this would be considered a solution for that, and that's something you could look at down the road. But just to give you an update on at the state level, what's available for grants.
Thank you.
And that $5 million through Commerce, through the KDOT plan, there's really no defined rules yet. We're still learning how that policy guideline and process would go into effect.
Well, and I sat in on some of those hearings, and so just for everybody to refresh, looking at who suggested them, that therefore subsequently the state added that in might be telling. So, Scott, and then Councilman.
Well, he can go ahead. I don't mind. I can wait.
Okay.
I think Michelle was
Oh, I'm sorry.
wanting to add something on this issue.
Good.
Good afternoon, Michelle Stubblefield, Greater Topeka Partnership. I think one thing we wanted to just back up a little bit and just let you know that regardless of any direction, Greater Topeka Partnership in this talent development perspective. We also see it from the family perspective and quality of life. And I think one thing we do want to look at is I've always heard that there's going to be a second round of those dollars. So I think that's where we need to look at for seeing what other opportunities are available. That was expressed, I think, last week. So this is just round one. There is a round two that could very well address a lot of these issues. We also have Glenda and Barbara Stapleton, who really have the history on the Tilson report and how that has all come to light, but we really see it from multiple prongs, and we are at the ready as well to help in that arena. The things that we're really looking at right now, especially in response to COVID and what we've seen and how the community has come and informed us, is a digital equity. That adoption, that access, very much starts at the home with children, but then obviously interviews are happening online now. So if you want to get a job, Zoom is the place to be. So we're looking at it from that aspect as well.
So we need to teach everybody, including me, how to get that backdrop on your Zoom thing. So
Exactly.
And get the light lined up all right so that you look like an appealing prospect.
Yes, but these past few months, we have also worked with Cox and having those discussions on how to get it into the family and in 501.
That's good. I mean, seriously, that those kinds of things that aren't tech, they don't necessarily even cost any money. Just how do you do it?
Yeah.
So that it's successful for people. That's good. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, Sylvia, go ahead.
Michelle, you talked about round two with the monies. When will that happen?
That's going to be a state option. That's just simply something that we have heard.
How they're divvying up the money?
How they're divvying those dollars up. Yeah.
Okay. And that's commerce, right?
Yeah.
I mean, certainly the city gets involved in the transportation and TA kind of stuff. And you all, Curtis has been along anyway. Are you actively doing, that you know of, any advocacy to make sure there's some urban money when that happens?
Yeah, we would probably check with Curtis to make sure he's heavily involved in all those arenas. So we'd rely on his communication on that part.
Good. Just looking for head nodding from Barbara and Glenda, see if they've got their fingers in the air. All right.
But we're at the ready, so.
Thank you so much for weighing in on that.
Thanks,
Do
Michelle.
you still have something?
No, I just,
Oh, you just want to make sure, because
Yeah.
I didn't see her. You're right. Scott, do you have anything more to add?
The only thing I would say is that whether we do take a community broadband approach or whether we do take, like you mentioned earlier, an approach that looks at more than just our students, I think the expansion of this beyond the conversation of the student in the student's household is a helpful approach to take, simply because if we are looking at how do we connect our elderly for the virtual doctor's visits, then we're also coincidentally looking at who the grandparents might be, who might be monitoring the kid during the day during virtual learning. And so I think that the important thing is that we do take these steps simply because we will be helping out from multiple different perspectives on that problem.
Okay. Good point about, realizing that we're all interconnected with the all the different reasons. All right, so we've identified that we want to stick with Topeka, focused on students, but it's worth it to keep the others in mind. We're seeing that the problem really is about 6 different issues of actually just getting people connected with what's available and getting it to work inside their homes, which is part of it's 501, part of it's much more generic in, just communication. Part of it's much more generic in terms of just understanding tech, understanding how broadband works, understanding multiple devices, dealing with, when Neil was telling me what he'd learned from the conversation with you, the issue of just old devices. I really hadn't thought about that, but if part of the connectivity is somebody's got an old desktop computer We always thought the problem was just they didn't have windows on it, right? But is there much of a deep dive into the aging equipment? Those of you who are involved in whatever way, do you think older equipment is part of it?
I could say for our students, probably not so much, simply because we send home the device and we try to keep those pretty refreshed. So I'd say probably not for the students, but again, we're connecting a household. That's the goal. And so whatever the adult might be using in the household could be an issue and could lead to some of those difficulties.
I know that I was sponsoring a young woman from Highland Park High School this spring and was mentoring her application to a Rotary opportunity. And what we learned was that it wasn't getting done. It was a form, kind of like a job application would be, but in her case, you think of college applications, internship, jobs for students. She finally said, I can't do it on my phone. She needed to maybe be able to access a printer so she could print it out and pencil it, and printers aren't part of that connectivity thing. And then she needed to be able to, I don't recall if she had to sign and scan it, but she wasn't sure. And so having a scanner, having a printer, all those auxiliary things, and having a keyboard, she didn't have it. And she finally told me, but it took a long time. And then I said, well, we'll get you someplace where you can fill this darn thing out. If I'd known, we would have done something sooner. So again, back to that aging or not, or just working off a little tablet with a little teeny keyboard when you're needing to type a paper or fill out a document. I'm doing a way back here with students, but our students, is that working for them, or is it something we're ignoring?
I'd say for the most part, because the teachers are designing their lessons around the idea that that is what the student is using. I think for the most part, it's working. I do think that we have some challenges for the students that are working with some of our CTE programs, and that's why we also offer laptops for checkout in our schools, because they're doing things that a student's going to need a little bit more robust equipment for, a little bit better processing speeds. So I think we kind of are addressing it, but I suppose it's still a problem, for example, that you identified printing. Where they would be at school, might be able to print in a library, but if they're at home, they may not have that resource available to them. But I think from an equipment perspective, for the most part, it's the things that our students need to do for their learning, the things that our teachers are expecting them to do. For the most part, that is being done on the Chromebooks or the iPads pretty successfully.
Okay. Well, and of course, at that point, nobody was in school at all, so there was no access to the equipment that was in school. And of course, she was a kid, so she didn't have a car. She didn't have transportation. So it was fascinating to see. All right. Well, go ahead.
Just to wrap up,
Yep.
I think in terms of some sort of metric to gauge where we're at, I know Scott mentioned 2,700 families that he was targeting. So perhaps next time we could get a feel for how much progress he's making. Obviously, never going to get to 100%, but get that number down. Probably feel like there's some success there. And then maybe suggest that at the next meeting we talk a little bit about, what are the issues with the next tier, which maybe is adults trying to be able to access the internet for job applications or whatever, and then maybe the older population. Perhaps we could invite the appropriate folks to talk about those two issues and see if we can make some headway there.
All right. And as part of the progress between this meeting and next, we did identify those problem areas, and maybe between Cox and 501, we could lean on you to have kind of done some problem solving and tell us how you fixed everything. How's that?
I will be glad to report that success.
Love it. That way, when the seniors and the workforce folks report, we'll already have the answers to all the problems, and we'll just zip right on. Is there a point in asking somebody to stay on top of Megan's looking eager on the whole community broadband issue between now and a month from now, in terms of certainly keeping our radar on to see if anything's emerging that's a possibility for it? But is there anything else we should do on that one between now and? I'm getting head shakes. So, okay, we've got Curtis on it anyway, and partnership people here. Well, let's do that then for broadband next time. I am looking at a month from today, if we stick with the sorry? Excuse me? Yes, please, but go up to the mic.
And I didn't just want to get away from this meeting and the invite without making a comment, because it was a great discussion.
Okay.
And what you're talking about, bridging the gap, which is what I had shared at the last JADO meeting about the initiative that we were able to pull together with DCF, because we are talking about that population. When I was dialoguing with Megan and Michelle, specifically their service for those households that have kids that are eligible for free or reduced lunch. Now, kids have parents, and when we're talking about this workforce issue, if they're eligible for free or reduced lunch, that means that their individual parent or guardian is probably low income. When we're talking about that, they have to be looking for work, and I think in the notes there it said that maybe two kids in the home on Zoom may really be the capacity of the service that may be provided. Now, hotspots is not a bad technology. It's a great alternative. It doesn't trump wired service, but it is an adequate alternative service. When we're talking about these adults and things, I think that one of the things is when you talk about competition and providers, we are a provider. We provide hotspots through that is on the Sprint T-Mobile network. I power myself and others, even outside the county, out in rural areas outside the state, with our hotspots. They're having no problems with it whatsoever. Our hotspots, our program can probably reach in areas where Cox has no footprint whatsoever, in the state or anywhere. And so I would like people to realize that, and I have 3 copies that I shared, and one for Mr. Trout as well, what this Bridging the Gap service is about. And DCF should be a partner because they have agreed to purchase the 1-year service. That is good speed for homes. Maybe that parent who has 3 kids on Zoom and therefore she does not have the ability of going online and applying for work because these things are real and right now that they have to do. Maybe that is an additional service that they may need. If they have a child in the home that is eligible for free or reduced lunch and they're receiving TANF or cash assistance, then under this support agreement through DCF will purchase them a computer, a better computer. So maybe we need to identify, who those people are. They have internet access at home, but they don't have the computer. There are some other things that I think that if you're just only talking with 501 and Cox, you're not getting the full breadth of what is available, and then figuring out how can we best inform those target populations in the city.
Right.
What is available and how can we help them working together? Because if it's something that I feel is better of a wired service for Cox, I want to learn that process and be an advocate and get them people signed up. But if it's something for these other programs, or other eligible populations, that this isn't COVID money from DCF that has to be spent by December 30th. This is something that is ongoing. And so I don't think that people really understand that this population here is just as critical as the kids that are in the school.
Can you get something to Liz about that program so that we can all have it before we meet again? Okay,
I don't know if you're going to, if you're only going to be discussing that during this meeting. I proposed several times. I think that even from the notes that you would share, an equity plan, Ms. Millsap pretty much said that that's what's needed. When you're talking about a public-private partnership, I think that there are community partners who will help fund certain type of programs. That's where a fund being set up. And when you were talking about she had said someone should own it. You know, it's not just this meeting here once a month, but there's a coalition of people who are just as important or want to be a part of this conversation. So that if I wouldn't have said anything now, I would have had to wait a whole nother month to come up and share with you that you all should know about the Bridging the Gap initiative with DCF so that you can effectively sell it to your NIAs and the other people that you have, so that if they fall through the cracks, which numerous people have mentioned, it doesn't mean that there isn't something that might be available.
Already.
Yes. And so that's why I'm glad that Mr. Councilman Dobler took this up and you invited me to speak. And I was able to get DCF to see the bigger picture because they want internet access into the home of the people who are seeking work. But these are also TANF, they have children in the home too.
Right. So what we need to figure out, we've talked about 501 today, but you know, whatever material we need between now and next month, again, it gets back to, okay, what's the problem? Is there a problem in terms of with the services that we already have? Do we have enough? Or if we don't, what's missing? So that, you know, if what you're describing is a process that either as is or with a little bit of expansion could take care of what they're talking about in terms of, in effect, community broadband, then we just need to, you know, we're just trying to figure out, people think there's a problem. Is there a problem? If there is one, what's the solution?
Well, if the problem is a kid going to grandma's, then you take a hotspot. That kid takes a hotspot to grandma's. He knows how to use it, and then he has it there for the whole time in there with that non-custodial parent or how have you. There are solutions. All the parts needed for the car that comes in first or last on race day is right in the middle of the floor. People just have to put it together.
That's what we need. That's what we need. So if it's what I would call portable, you know, you've got that hotspot, then fine. We just, again, we're here to try and figure out if there is a problem.
And so that's
what
why
is it?
I couldn't wait for other people to go and speak with DCF because the money and stuff is available there. We have gotten that. Now I want to try to push or cajole the leadership, you know, to take advantage of the opportunities that are available. It's not just Cox. They're just one part of the picture, you know. But if you just listen to the conversation, I wouldn't want people to get that tunnel vision thing. Well, we have to look to Megan and Cox to fix it. There are other things that are available.
That's what we need. That's what we need. Councilwoman, you have a...
No, and Lazone, you bring up a good point, because I spoke with somebody there at DCF. Actually, I worked there, but, and they were trying to see what we were going to do to see how to serve the rest of the kids, because not only are there children on low to moderate income on services, but you don't forget about the foster kids. Yes. The foster kids that the foster parents, that's a big part of it too. That and see their parents are not necessarily looking for jobs, but they still have those children. And so if they have a foster home and they don't have services in that home for that child, they have to provide that for them or try to help them provide that. And there's a lot of kids out there right now that are in foster care, and that's another part of the puzzle that they're looking at, how to help them as well. Now, you're right, just because they're foster care doesn't mean that they're going to be in Shawnee County. They can be in Jeff County, Pot County, Holton, Jackson, or whatever. And again, they'll still need those services. Those services, even, you know, all the way up to the tribal, you know. So we gotta, if we're really looking to serve our kids, we need to look at that as well. And I think that's what they look at with their monies. But what I've heard is we're trying to see what it covers, what it entails, so we'll know who we can help serve better. But we got to keep that mindful too, because it is what it is. We're in the times of grandparents raising grandkids, even though they're under foster care. And some of them aren't computer savvy. They don't know. All they know is I'm supposed to send this little booger to school, and he ain't going. They don't understand that, you know, they're not going but half a day. You know, the first part of the day they're not going, but the second part they are. But they still need to get on the first part and do their homework. So that is a big part of it. You're right. So
and so if there's if there's those who cannot get it because they owe a bill.
Right.
You know, this is the bridging the gap
right
opportunities.
Right.
And then to help them get a job, nice income, so they can apply the full service, Cox experience.
Right.
Whatever
but
the issue
they
may
don't
be.
have to. There is no place in Topeka where they can't have internet in the home. That's one good thing I'm happy about.
Yeah. Because we haven't always heard that.
No.
We haven't always heard that. He's right. So, and I'm just going to, before I shut up, I want to shout out to Don McWilliams because as soon as all this went down with the schools, Boys and Girls Club, they said, what can we do to the kids that we're already serving to help them with their schoolwork?
Right.
And they have internet, with them. And so I know for a fact my grandson's there. I wouldn't know what to do because they're helping them. And I know there's a lot of people that weren't able to get in to get that service. So anyway, you're right. We need to look at that. So
Yeah, we're kind of hitchhiking the kids all over town right now
Yeah.
between live and remote school and so on. I want to dispel one thing, something that Councilwoman Ortiz just brought up. In terms of, and I'm looking at Megan and Lazone, you could help too. In terms of the level of service that is available citywide now, how many devices can be operating at the same time? And go ahead and qualify that answer by whether people are on Zoom or just checking emails, if you would, because that's something else about education that's out there.
So I can only speak to Cox and the services that we provide, our internet solutions. We offer, like I said, I think our starter is about $25,300. Usually that's a couple of devices, maybe two. And we offer other packages up to, from 50 megabytes per second download. Then you have 100 and 150 up to 1 gig. So again, different speeds, different tiers. The 1 gig are unlimited devices on Zoom. So if, let's say, I was asking for an example, I was asking for a friend. For 10 people in her house to do Zoom calls at once, she would need gig service. That just kind of gives you an idea. I think when we were looking at the different products and solutions, there was one tier, maybe that middle tier of about maybe 50 or 100 megabytes per second speed. You're looking at about 5 to 7 devices. So all of our information is also online at cox.com.
But this minimum service, the service that is being purchased through 501 is at a level that you could really only have 2 at a time.
When you're
possibly.
talking about Zoom, yes. But of course you can do email and that sort of thing. And Scott may have more. He's the IT expert, so he can probably provide better insight into that. I'm just government affairs.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's all right, man.
Well, quick, we've got one other thing, but I want to make sure we got all the facts on the table if we can. Scott?
Sure. I will say that that's about accurate. If I'm using the full Zoom suite, that's about 2 connections. And really what drives that is the upload. If the upload speed is limited to the 3, then you're basically looking at my camera feed and somebody else's camera feed, basically taking up the majority of that. So what we encourage our students to do when they're in households of more than 2 is we encourage them to rotate their camera. So in other words, I might use it when my class is involved with a teacher-student discussion. I might use my camera, but my sibling might not because they might be in a listen-only type of situation. So we ask our families that who have had difficulty with that, we talk to them and kind of guide them and counsel them towards doing strategies that help all of the students in the family have a positive experience at the same time.
Thank you. Well, let's make sure we add that one way or another to the tech education or the how it works list, because that would make a difference. If you got 4 kids, it just would. All right. I think we've got a plan. I think that again, we're going to have a very brief section on code compliance here, but just so everybody knows, if we're going to the time we've been regularly meeting, we're talking about our next meeting being on Monday, the 16th of November from 3 to 5. Does that still work for the committee members?
Yep.
Okay. Just want to, while we have almost everybody here, just clarify that right now. And hearing nothing, hold your peace. That's where we're rolling for the next meeting. And minutes will be available. Invites will come out from Liz. Thank you so much. We've learned a lot, and I love it when we do that, and the situation is much better than we thought. And appreciate all the work that everyone is doing to make this happen. Dawn McWilliams is on saying thank you. Lalo as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Lalo says he got kicked off because he's got 3 kids at home on Zoom meetings. Boom! Okay.
Scott, you need to call Lalo. I would recommend that.
How about that? All right, thank you. We're going to briefly have Mike Haugen talk to us about how Code is dealing with mold right now and then touch on our next steps.
Scott.
Well, I'm Mike Haugen, the director of the property maintenance unit, and Chairwoman asked about mold, gave me a phone call a week or so ago. So,
Her. Okay, not me.
so statewide, or through the United States, very few states have any laws dealing with mold, and there's even less counties and cities. And Shawnee County doesn't have anything to deal with mold, and the city of Topeka does not have a ordinance or a code that actually speaks about mold. When I first got here in property maintenance, the answer when they called us, we don't deal with mold. Have a nice day, call somebody. And I didn't find that satisfactory. So I looked through all our codes trying to figure out what we can address. Well, if you have mold in your house, that's not a very sanitary situation. So we can address it through sanitation. We also address it for the cause of mold, because the mold's coming into your house for some reason, like a leaking roof, leaking pipe, poor ventilation. So if somebody calls and says, look, I have a mold issue, we will go out there and we will take a look for the cause of the mold. And if the mold is where we can cite it for sanitation, we will. If it's surface mold, though, the tenant is responsible for keeping a clean and sanitary area. They can clean it. It's not hard to clean surface mold. You spray vinegar on it or bleach solution, and you can wipe it down, and that's their responsibility. What we don't get into, though, is parts per million. We have no idea what a healthy air quality is in somebody's house, nor do we have the equipment, the training, certification, or anything else like that, nor does anybody else shy of professional companies that do it, and they come in and they bill you a hefty little price to find out your air quality and tell you. A tenant has the right to a habitable space. So if it is dangerous because of mold, what they should be doing is reaching out first to the landlord and say, look, I have a mold issue. They should be doing that in writing so that they have documentation. And then a landlord is ultimately liable for any of the issues that could result out of that. But if the landlord chooses to ignore the tenant and their issues with that, they can call us and they can ask us to come and do an inspection. If we see a sanitation issue or we see that it's being caused by some type of leak or some type of damage, we will cite that, give the property owner the time to correct it. And if they don't, we will send them to court.
Thank you, Mike. I asked him to bring that forward because, of course, I got a complaint about it, a question, and it'd been a long time, and it used to be that, as Mike said, code would not deal with that, and people were worried about it in their vents, in their basements, and a lot of science has emerged about allergies and things like that, and it had been a no-win issue for a long time. So I not only wanted Mike to go ahead and address it, but I was thrilled that code had figured out how to deal with it and that it was no longer this kind of black hole of, oh, well, sorry, too bad. So
I did poll our call takers of people that normally take the phone calls and ask them how they handle it when the phone call comes in. And one of my staff said, hey, the only thing we do is we address the cause of it. So I educated that staff member and said, no, we can do sanitation and we can take a look at it that way. In reality, though, if it's a bad mold problem that's inside your walls, we're not going to see it. We're not going to know it's there. And it probably is there because you're the one that's being sick with the allergies and all that. And a tenant would most likely have to pay to get the air quality tested to prove it, because we're not cutting a hole into the landlord's wall to see if there might be mold.
maybe we can check if you're not sure, the KDHE would do that, but it's just it's simple enough, and I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that was being covered, lest it come up at any point. Thank you so much. Any questions about mold? All right, in terms of the rest of our code compliance stuff, the way we left it last time was that you all wanted me to frame up some initiatives. I am in the process of doing that, and just as soon vet them a little bit more. Figured we use all our time anyway today. So I want to visit with you about them, Mike, for instance, before we bring them to the committee even. So we'll have that on our agenda too. Hopefully can allow a little more time than today, and look at, again, the ideas that came out of the last meeting were to go ahead and, if the committee was comfortable with them, to frame up some initiatives, perhaps vet them through the CAC. We'll talk about that further next month in terms of exactly how to tackle it. Any questions or feedback on that? Without any further issues then, anybody else have items for us? Manager? Without any further ado, and our next meeting already set, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
I'm so thrilled.